On the debt ceiling, can you just walk us through the decision by the president to reach out to the leaders and hold this meeting now? And you've made it very clear that his position hasn't changed. So what changed his mind to now hold this meeting?
We've been very clear in also criticizing their budget, as I did at the top here. But now after a couple of days, the president reached out, and after analyzing what they put forth, and the president's going to have a meeting with them next week.
But if he's not willing to negotiate, what is this meeting? Like, what is he coming to the table with? And does he see this as a conversation that's only about the debt ceiling, and then there's a separate meeting later that's about the budget? Or when Kevin McCarthy comes and wants to talk about all of it, what are the mechanics of this meeting? And can you do those two things at the same time over the coming weeks?
Sorry, I was trying to wait to see where the question was going to end. I apologize, my bad. Yeah. Look, he's going to make it very clear in this meeting that they're going to have next week how it is Congress's constitutional duty to act. He is not going to negotiate on the debt ceiling. Been very clear. That is not going to change. Now, I have said, as I said from the top here, that he's willing to have a separate conversation about their spending.
But when you say a separate conversation, is that, again, only after the debt ceiling is raised, or is he going to have that separate conversation on May 9th at the same time when they're all sitting at the table together next week?
So look, the president's going to make it clear to them how it is not that they have to avoid a default. It is their constitutional duty for Congress to do this. It is their constitutional duty.
Ultimately, what is the president's priority? Is it to avoid this thing of linking debt ceilings from now forever to budget negotiations, which he doesn't want? Or is it to avoid a debt default? Because I know he wants both things, but what's his ultimate priority? Because like in a game of chicken, at some point you can wait for the car, you can wait for the car, but you might have to jump out the way.
So look, and I said this earlier, the president thought it would be a good opportunity to remind congressional leaders of the urgency of preventing default when the Secretary Yellen's letter came out. So that is incredibly important. We cannot default as a country.
Get the playing chicken analogy. You might not have a choice to think about this too much at some point. If the proverbial car is about a couple of inches away, he's got to dive out the way. Does that mean he accepts what they say and avoids default if it comes down to that?
The question is for Congress. It really is.
Given the urgency of the moment, the timeline in terms of the debt limit, the suspension of the debt limit is what needed to be pursued. Is the view of the White House right now that suspension is really the only viable option, not raising by a particular number?
I'm not going to get into specifics. I hear you, Phil. What I'm going to say is we've been very clear. It needs to be done without condition. This is their constitutional duty to deal with the debt limit.
Question of the timing of this invitation, because as recently as Friday and into the weekend, officials here in this building had been saying there were no plans to invite Speaker McCarthy. It felt like a rather abrupt shift then to this Big Four invitation going out Monday. Was the White House caught off guard at all by the timing of the new X date, as it's known, which seemed to be earlier than even some analysts had been forecasting?
So look, we knew Secretary Yellen's letter would be released yesterday, and the president thought it was a good opportunity to remind congressional leaders of the urgency of preventing default act, and that is something that we've been very, very clear about and very repetitive about, as you know, from here.
The debt ceiling. You talked about this is Congress's duty, we're not a deadbeat nation, all that kind of stuff. But what's the president's plan to convince McCarthy of this? What do you plan to do to get him over to your side and convince him to see things that way?
Well, the question is to Speaker McCarthy. What has changed?
What you said about Congress's role in the debt limit, is it then the position of the White House that there is no legal alternative to congressional action? There's nothing else that could be done to raise or suspend the debt limit or prevent a default in any way absent action from Congress?
Do you mean legal action from us?
There's no executive order or any sort of executive action that could be taken either through the Treasury or the President to avoid a default.
So again, I'm going to sound like a broken record as I have been for the past several months. Congress must act. We will not entertain scenarios where Congress compromises the full faith and credit of the United States.
So that means that the administration does not believe there's any power it has.
Republicans and Democrats have prevented default 78 times since 1960, including 3 times, as I've mentioned, over and over in this specific briefing under Trump. And so they have to do that again. So that's where I'm going to leave that for you.
One more.